Hello students, welcome to Shri classes, and this is the last lecture where I will be taking the question answers, and let us go through the in-text questions. Why is diffusion insufficient to meet oxygen requirement of multicellular organisms like humans? This has been explained in my PPT by taking this question itself as an exclusive question, isn't it? In see here, multicellular organisms like humans, all the cells are not exposed to the environment. All the cells are not exposed to the environment, and therefore, to meet the oxygen requirement, we need to have complicated organ systems for performing for respiration purpose. Whereas unicellular organisms, if we consider, the entire cell is exposed to environment, simple diffusion process will be able to supply oxygen to it. But all our cells which are located inside, which are not exposed to the environment, how do they get oxygen? By means of organ systems, respiratory system, that I have explained already. What criteria do we use to decide whether something is alive? This also I have explained. One is visible movements, non-visible movements such as molecular movements, and all life processes, growth of the body are the criteria we use. What are outside raw materials used for by an organism? That I have discussed in detail in my this thing. Like outside, what are the outside raw materials for by an organism, especially for plants and all? It will be something like CO2, water, etc. For us, oxygen and some food material, external food which we depend upon, which I have discussed already. Let me check one question number 3. Outside material here I'll read once again. Raw materials used by an organism are: first one, food, water, oxygen in case of animal; carbon dioxide, water, oxygen for plant. Is it right? For animals, it is food, water, and oxygen are the outside materials, and carbon dioxide, water, and oxygen in case of plant. That's okay. What processes would you consider essential for maintaining life? All the life processes: nutrition, then respiration, excretion, etc. All these life processes, circulation or transportation, all these are the processes which we require. Let us look at the next in-text questions. See here, one small thing, dental caries. See, dental caries refers to tooth decay. Here important, the tooth enamel is made up of phosphates, where it is given. It begins on bacteria. Yeah, see here, the tooth decay, what is that causes the tooth decay? We are studying in acids, bases, and salts also, and also here we'll see dental caries means basically it's a tooth decay. What exactly happens is, whenever we eat the food, bacteria present in the mouth would be able to act upon the sugar contents, and they will be able to produce the acid basically. When see, the sugar is converted into acids by the bacteria. So when the acids of the mouth, acid content of the mouth increases, then the corrosion, due to corrosion action of the acid, the tooth enamel will get corroded, and therefore the tooth decay occurs. Hence, every time whenever we eat the food, after consumption of the food, mouth should be rinsed with water properly, or use the toothpaste so that it will neutralize the acidic content. So you can write a small note on dental caries yourself. Okay, let me go to the next in-text questions here. Yeah, here we have what are the differences between autotrophic and heterotrophic nutrition? In autotrophic nutrition, the food is synthesized by the organism. In heterotrophic, organisms derive their food from other organisms. Autotrophs contain chlorophyll pigment. Heterotrophs do not contain chlorophyll pigment. What else is there? Autotroph, heterotroph. The organism here, in case of autotrophs, depends upon the inorganic substances, simple inorganic substances such as CO2 and water, isn't it? Whereas in heterotrophic nutrition, organisms depend on complex organic molecules, because all the food is made up of complex organic compound basically. So the food that is consumed by heterotrophic is complex in nature, and autotrophs depend upon the simple inorganic substances. And what else? Autotrophic nutrition is found in plants, green plants and algae. Heterotrophic nutrition is observed in animals such as human beings, lion, tiger, etc. you can say. Then here one more important thing here, in autotrophic nutrition, do you find digestion there? So digestion is a process which is absent in autotrophic nutrition, whereas in heterotrophic nutrition digestion is present. These are some of the differences which we can list it. Okay. Next, where do plants get each of the raw materials required for photosynthesis? This is simple, you should be able to answer. What is the role of the acid in our stomach? Two important roles is played by acid. It provides the medium acidic. It provides the acidic medium so that the action of the enzyme pepsin increases. Or how do you say? It provides acidic medium inside the stomach, wherein the action of enzyme pepsin is effective. And one more role is it kills disease causing pathogens or germs, you can say simply. What is the function of digestive enzyme? It converts complex organic substances into simple inorganic substances. How is the small intestine designed to absorb digested food? This, along with the question I have discussed, it contains finger-like extensions or projections called villi, which increases the surface area for absorption of the nutrients, isn't it? Therefore, the small intestine is designed to absorb the digested food, mainly by means of finger-like projections that increase the absorption area, surface area for the absorption purpose. So that is which I have discussed already. Okay, so just go through these questions once again. If anything is there, let's discuss. Okay, few more questions. What advantage over an aquatic organism does a terrestrial organism have with regard to obtaining oxygen for respiration? How do aquatic organisms obtain their oxygen? They obtain their oxygen from dissolved oxygen in the water, isn't it? But the oxygen, the soluble rate of oxygen, the solubility of oxygen is less in water, and aquatic animals have to depend upon only the dissolved oxygen. So aquatic animals are exposed to less quantity of oxygen. Compare with terrestrial organisms. Terrestrial organisms can take oxygen directly from the atmosphere, and that too in huge quantity. So this is the advantage for terrestrial organisms. What are different ways in which glucose is oxidized to provide energy in various organisms? Here basically the three pathways in which glucose is broken down to produce energy is the question. Yeast cells, it is converted to ethanol, CO2 and energy. In muscle cells, lactic acid and energy. In mitochondria, it is CO2, water and energy, isn't it? So these three pathways which I have discussed in detail, you have to write the answer as for the second question, the pathways, three pathways by means of which glucose is converted into energy. That diagram needs to be explained for the second question. How is oxygen and carbon dioxide transported in human beings? See, oxygen is hemoglobin pigment, which is a red colored pigment present in the cell RBC, that has great affinity for oxygen. It combines with oxygen to form a compound called oxyhemoglobin, and thus oxygen is transported to different cells. Whereas carbon dioxide, solubility of carbon dioxide is more in water, so it is transported in the dissolved form in the plasma, and it is transported to different parts. That means CO2 is transported in human beings in the dissolved form in the blood, whereas oxygen is transported in the form of combined form, that is oxyhemoglobin. That is what we can say. How are lungs designed in human beings to maximize the area of exchange of gases? Lungs contain balloon-like structures called alveoli, and which are thin. These are balloon-like structures containing a very thin membrane, and it provides very large surface area for exchange of gases by means of diffusion process. If we spread alveoli, approximately we may end up with about 80 square meters of area for the exchange of gases. So this is what we can write the answer. This is how the lungs are designed to maximize the area of exchange of gases. Okay, fine. We'll go to the next one. We'll take up the few more questions here. What are the components of the transport system in human beings? What are the functions of these components? Transport system refers to circulatory system. So heart, blood vessels, and blood itself. These are the three components of transport system in human beings, isn't it? Which are the components of circulatory system also? So heart is a main pumping organ, and that is able to pump the blood throughout the body, and blood vessels are the ones which transport substances. And what is the function of the blood here? Blood transports oxygen, carbon dioxide, food, which you can say nutrients, and also nitrogenous waste substances. And what else? Also it transports hormones to the target organs or the target cells. Okay, so these are the functions which you can explain quite easier question. Why it is necessary to separate oxygenated and deoxygenated blood in mammals and birds? This I have discussed already. See, mammals and birds, they have to maintain their body temperature at a constant value. So constant basically. So in order to maintain the temperature, there is a great demand for energy, and efficient system that supplies oxygen is required. And hence, in order to ensure the efficient supply of oxygen, the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood must be separated, and hence we are having 4-chambered hearts. Mammals will have 4-chambered hearts. This is what you can write. What are the components of transport system in highly organized plants? Xylem and phloem are the components of highly organized plants. Xylem transports water and phloem transports food. How are water and minerals transported in plants? Water and minerals are transported in plants by means of a complex conductive tissue called xylem, isn't it? So how it is transported? See, you should explain here. Transpiration, which is a loss of excess water present in the plants by means of vapor through the stomatal pores, that is aerial parts of the plant, is called transpiration. And this transpiration creates negative osmotic pressure on the upper portion of the plant, and therefore plant would be able to suck the water and the minerals through the roots towards the upper portion. So transpiration creating a negative osmotic pressure helps in conducting both water and minerals from roots to leaves basically. That is what you can say. How is food transported in plants? By means of conductive tissue called phloem. But one important point is to be mentioned. Here the diffusion of sugar takes place at the expense of ATP molecule. Once the sugar enters into phloem tissue by spending energy, it will dissolve with the water present there, and that particular region will be a high pressure region. Then the diffused sugar moves from a region of high pressure to a region of low pressure, and thus the sugar is transported from different parts of the body, that is of the plant, that is from high pressure region to low pressure region. You can give an example also. In winter seasons and all, the energy requirements of the buds is met by the sugar stored in the roots basically, which will be transported to the buds, and this is by means of spending the energy. That is one difference which you should highlight it. Okay, then we'll go to the next set of questions. We'll look at some more questions. Describe the structure and functioning of nephrons. You should describe about mainly 3 components. One is C-shaped structure, which is called a Bowman capsule, and inside you have a glomeruli or a glomerulus basically, and the tubular portion which is connected to the duct. So in the glomeruli, the filtration of the blood takes place, and the Bowman capsule collects the filtrate, and tubular part transports the filtrate, and initial filtrate, it contains in large quantities amino acids, glucose, water, and by selective reabsorption, most of the major amount of water, amino acids, salts, required salts those are transported back to the blood capillaries, and only the nitrogenous waste substances are retained into nephron tube, which is connected to a collecting duct through which the urine formed is discharged once again. So this is how we can explain the methods. This is functioning of the nephrons. What are the methods used by plants to get rid of excretory products? What are the methods used by the plants? See, oxygen is an excretory product during photosynthesis. During respiration, CO2 is a major elimination. Wilting of leaves, production of gums and resins in the xylem tissue, and what else? These are the methods by which plants will get rid of their excretory products, you can say. How is the amount of urine produced regulated? Amount of urine produced depends upon the amount of water present and amount of salts to be extracted or excreted. So by a selective reabsorption process, the amount of urine produced is regulated inside the body. This is your answer for this question. Okay, let's see some more questions. Let us look at the questions in the exercises given at the end of the text. Kidneys in human beings are the part of nutrition, excretion, respiration, transportation. Excretion. The xylem in plants are responsible for transportation of water. Only transportation of water, isn't it? Okay. Autotrophic mode of nutrition requires carbon dioxide and water, sunlight, chlorophyll. All these are required for autotrophic nutrition. Breakdown of pyruvate to give carbon dioxide, water and energy takes place in cytoplasm, chloroplast, nucleus, mitochondria. Breakdown of pyruvate to CO2, water and energy takes place in mitochondria. What takes place in a cytoplasm? Glycolysis, which is the conversion of glucose into pyruvate. Glucose is a 6 carbon atom molecule and pyruvate is a 3 carbon atom molecule. So in cytoplasm, breakdown of glucose to pyruvate takes place, and in mitochondria, pyruvate to CO2, water and energy takes place, isn't it? So answer is mitochondria. How are fats digested in our bodies? Where does this process takes place? See, in order to answer this question, you have to explain the digestion of fats in two processes. First, in duodenum, due to secretion of bile juice, the bile salts present in the bile juice would be able to carry out the emulsification process. What is emulsification process? Conversion of bigger fat globules into smaller globules, isn't it? That is first thing. And after this one, these fats, when they are taken up by the intestine, the intestinal juice, which contains enzymes, will convert finally the small intestine, what I am talking about. Okay, finally the small intestine will convert these fat smaller globules of the fat molecules into fatty acids and glycerol. So the final digestion of fats into fatty acids and glycerol takes place in small intestine by intestinal juice. But you must also mention, as I said, in the duodenum, that is the first stage, emulsification of the fats takes place. So two stage. First, emulsification of the fats, emulsification of fat molecules in duodenum, beginning portion of the intestine, by means of bile juice or the bile salts present in the bile juice, secreted by liver basically. Before it is secreted, it is produced by the liver, stored by the gallbladder, and then it is secreted into duodenum. I think you understood what I said. How are fats digested in our bodies? Where does this process takes place? So duodenum and then small intestine is the place where it takes place. Okay. Let us look at sixth question. What is the role of saliva in digestion of the food? Saliva contains enzyme called salivary amylase, which converts, what is the function? It converts starch to sugar. So this is how the primary digestion takes place in the mouth also. The digestion starts in the mouth itself. Salivary amylase, which converts starch into sugar. What are the necessary conditions for autotrophic nutrition and what are its byproducts? Sunlight, energy and chlorophyll are most essential conditions, and sunlight energy is trapped and it is used to break down water molecule, isn't it, into oxygen and hydrogen. So oxygen is a byproduct during the autotrophic nutrition. Oxygen is the byproduct during the autotrophic nutrition. And one more condition, chlorophyll. What is the function? Chlorophyll absorbs the sunlight and converts it into chemical energy, which breaks down the water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen. So thing is, what are the necessary conditions? Conditions are sunlight, energy and chlorophyll, you can say basically. Okay, and what are its byproducts? Oxygen is a byproduct basically, you can say, because glucose is produced and that is used, and oxygen is a byproduct over here which is released into the atmosphere. What are the differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration? Name some organisms that use anaerobic mode of respiration. Aerobic respiration takes place in the presence of oxygen. Anaerobic respiration takes place in the absence of oxygen. In aerobic respiration, more amount of energy is produced. In anaerobic respiration, less amount of energy is produced. Aerobic respiration takes place in mitochondria. Anaerobic respiration takes place in yeast cells as well as in cytoplasm. So these are the differences, you can say. Name the organisms that use anaerobic mode of respiration. Yeast cells. How are alveoli designed to maximize exchange of gases? We have covered this. What would be the consequences of deficiency of hemoglobin in our bodies? If there is a deficiency of hemoglobin, then oxygen transportation is affected, so indirectly affects the energy release, or less amount of energy is produced. A person becomes tired and exhausted, and that state is called anemic. And what else? What are the consequences of deficiency? A person becomes weak basically is the major consequence which you can say. Describe double circulation of blood in human beings, why it is necessary. This I have explained in detail. What are the differences between transport materials in xylem and phloem? In xylem basically water and minerals, in phloem food prepared by the plant. Differences between transport of materials xylem and phloem. That one more difference is xylem does not require energy, whereas phloem requires energy for transportation of materials. Xylem transport materials only from roots to the aerial parts. Phloem transports materials in all directions. These are the differences. Compare the functioning of alveoli in lungs, nephrons in kidneys with respect to their structure and functioning. So alveoli are thin membranous structures present in the lungs and are called the functional units of lungs, or the filtration functional units of lungs. Nephrons in the kidneys are the functional units of kidneys, and alveoli is made up of thin membrane. It is surrounded by extensive network of blood capillaries for exchange of gases. In kidneys, nephron has got a Bowman capsule into which glomeruli are present, and by diffusion process the blood is filtered in glomeruli, isn't it? That's what you can say. What else you will say? Alveoli helps in exchange of gases, and nephrons help in filtration of the blood. Filtration of blood means in formation of urine, you can say. So these are the main things which you can discuss. So go through these questions once again, and if you have any doubts you can get back to me. We have already gone through in text and exercise questions. Let us go through few more questions from your exemplar book. I request you to all of you to look into the exemplar questions also. Some of them are important and you may get those questions in the exams. Short answer type is what I am going to look at, because objective type there are large number of questions which are relatively easier. You can go through yourself, and only some of these questions I will be discussing over here. And long answer type of questions are there, which also I have explained in detail all the processes, and that I will not be covering. Okay, only the short answer type of questions are the ones which we are going to look at. These are also quite a large number of questions. Let's see now. Name the following process in plants that links light energy with chemical energy. Photosynthesis. Organisms that can prepare their own food. Autotrophs. Cell organelle where photosynthesis occurs. Chloroplast. Cell that surround a stomatal pore. Guard cells. Organisms that cannot prepare their own food. Heterotrophs. An enzyme secreted from gastric glands in stomach that acts on protein. Pepsin is the enzyme, isn't it? Next. All plants give out oxygen during day and carbon dioxide during night. Do you agree with this statement? Give reason. Yes, they do so. Why it is so? During photosynthesis, oxygen is a byproduct, and photosynthesis occurs in daytime. Therefore, oxygen is released during daytime. During night, respiration is a process which is a breakdown of glucose by a oxidation process. So oxygen is absorbed in the night, and CO2 is the resultant product of the respiration, along with water and energy. Energy is utilized by the plant, CO2 is released to the atmosphere. So during daytime, photosynthesis occurs, oxygen is a byproduct which is a major elimination. During night time, carbon dioxide is a result of respiration, and that is a major elimination. How do guard cells regulate opening and closing of stomatal pores? See, entry of water into the guard cells make them to swell, and swelling of the guard cells opens the stomatal pore. Exit of water from the guard cells make them to shrink. Shrinkage of the guard cells will close the stomatal pores. Okay, that is the one thing. One important aspect I would like to read from the textbook here. He uses for this question one particular words here. I'll read the complete answer. The swelling of guard cells due to absorption of water causes opening of stomatal pores, while shrinking of guard cell closes the pores. Opening and closing stomata occurs due to turgor, or it is called turgor, I think, turgor changes in the guard cells. When guard cells are turgid, that means when they swell up, stomatal pores open and they become flaccid. When contracts or shrinks, when it shrinks, the conditions, the stomatal aperture closes. So guard cells, when they are turgid, stomatal pores open. When the guard cells are flaccid, the stomatal pores are closed. Next question. Two green plants are kept separately in oxygen-free containers, one in the dark and the other in continuous light. Okay, which one will live longer, and give reasons? Two green plants, they are kept separately in oxygen-free containers. There is no oxygen available. Okay, oxygen-free containers, one in dark and the other in light. The one which is kept in the continuous light will survive. Why it is so? Even though there is an oxygen-free atmosphere, during the light, whenever the plant that is kept in a continuous light, photosynthesis takes place and oxygen is released. That oxygen is used in the night for respiration, and energy is produced. So the plant that is kept continuously under the sunlight, even in the absence of oxygen-free environment, will be able to survive. Therefore, plant kept in continuous light survives more. Okay. If a plant is releasing carbon dioxide and taking in oxygen during the day, does it mean that there is no photosynthesis occurring? You answer yourself. This we have discussed. Why do fishes die when they are taken out of water? Gills are designed to take up the oxygen from the absorbed water, or I can say the gill pouches are designed to take the oxygen which is in the dissolved form, and so when the fishes are brought to the terrestrial land, the gills are not designed to absorb the oxygen from the atmosphere, and hence they will die. Differentiate between autotroph and heterotroph. Autotroph, the food is synthesized by the organism. Heterotrophs, they depend for their food on other living organisms. Autotrophs contain chlorophyll. Lack of chlorophyll in heterotrophs. Is nutrition necessary for organisms? Discuss. Yes, it is necessary. Why? To meet the energy requirement is the first point. To generate the new cells, to repair the worn out cells, and to replace the dead cells. And it is necessary for one more aspect is written in your textbook. Let me check that one. 43 question number. Let me check that one. Yeah, very important point. First 2 points I think you have understood. Second, the one more third is the nutrition is necessary for an organism to develop resistance against various diseases. That is also one of the important points. Next, what would happen if the green plants disappear from the earth? No oxygen is produced. It is a threat for aquatic life, and existence of the life becomes difficult. In turn, if the animals are not there, then there is a scarcity of carbon dioxide for plants also. So finally, plants and living organisms, living animals basically, may die. There is a threat for extinction of the entire life. Leaves of a healthy potted plant were coated with Vaseline. Will this plant remain healthy for a long? No, because gaseous exchange does not take place, and because of which respiration as well as photosynthesis cannot occur, plants will die. How does aerobic respiration is different from anaerobic respiration? I'll read this from your book here. Very neatly it is given. Aerobic respiration. How does aerobic and anaerobic they differ in respiration? Aerobic respiration, oxygen is utilized. Anaerobic respiration, oxygen is not utilized. Aerobic respiration, it takes place in cytoplasm. Conversion of glucose into pyruvate takes place in cytoplasm. And what is that process called? Glycolysis. And finally, oxidation of glucose, the conversion of pyruvic acid to carbon dioxide, water and energy takes place in mitochondria, isn't it? That takes place in aerobic respiration. What about anaerobic respiration? It only takes place in cytoplasm, that is conversion of glucose to pyruvate. And another thing, the end products of aerobic respiration, let us compare. In aerobic respiration, carbon dioxide, water and energy are the end products. In anaerobic respiration, ethanol or lactic acid and carbon dioxide and small amount of energy are the outputs. In aerobic respiration, amount of energy produced is more. Anaerobic respiration, amount of energy produced is quite less. This is the way you can differentiate. Match the following, you do yourself. Differentiate between artery and vein. I have done this one already in my class. Arteries are, walls of the arteries are thick and elastic. Veins are thin and non-elastic. Arteries supply the blood, oxygenated blood from heart to different parts of the body. Veins carry deoxygenated blood or impure blood from different parts of the body back to the heart. Veins contain one-way walls. Arteries do not contain one-way walls. And one more important differentiation is with respect to lumen, the book talks about. The meaning of lumen is internal space. For arteries, narrow lumen, and for veins, larger lumen. And larger lumen, makes the blood to rush through to the heart basically. So the main one more difference is arteries have narrow lumen. Lumen means, once again, it is the internal space for carrying the blood. So arteries have narrow lumen and veins have wider lumen. That is these are the differentiations. What are the adaptations of leaf for photosynthesis? What do you think of this? Adaptations, how the leaves are adapted themselves for photosynthesis. Leaves provide a larger surface area for exchange of gases. Leaves provide larger surface area for absorption of the energy. And what else? Leaves contain chlorophyll for photosynthesis. Let me check the book. Any important these things? One more thing is the extensive network of veins in the leaves enables quick transport of substances inside the leaves, whether it is a water or CO2 or the production of the glucose and transportation. As the leaves contain large number of veins, that helps in transportation, that is quick transportation of substances inside the leaf. These are some of the things which and one more thing is, in general, the leaves are exposed normal to the sunlight. In general, is it not? Leaves are exposed normal to the sunlight. That is one more thing you can say. Next. Why is small intestine in herbivores longer than carnivores? Herbivores depend for their food on grass, which contains cellulose, complex substance which is difficult to digest, for the complete digestion, the intestine needs to be longer. Carnivores being dependent upon herbivores, or carnivores, they are dependent on those are the meat eaters. Meat is easily digestible, and hence they require shorter intestine. What will happen if mucus is not secreted by the gastric glands? There is due to corrosive action of the hydrochloric acid, the inner lining may erode. Erosion of the inner lining takes place. What is the meaning of erosion? Wearing out of the inner lining takes place, which leads to acidity and also some kind of bubble-like structures, which sometimes we term it as ulcers. So it may lead to ulcers if mucus is not secreted, or mucus is lining is not there. Okay. What is the significance of emulsification of fats? See, generally in the food, fats are present in larger globules. Means the fat content is, the fat particles are of bigger in nature in the food that we eat. Action of enzymes will be reduced if those are not broken down into smaller globules. In order to increase the efficiency of the action of the enzymes for emulsification process, that is breakdown of larger fat globules to a smaller fat globules, for the action of enzymes, these need to be broken down into smaller globules. Do you understand? That means, see, ultimately fats are converted to which products? Fatty acids and glycerol. If fat globules are larger, action of enzyme is not effective. In order to facilitate the action of enzyme and to increase the efficiency of the action of the enzyme, fat globules need to be converted into smaller globules or broken down into smaller globules, which is done by the bile juice, that is the bile salts present in the bile juice secreted by the liver will be utilized to break down the larger globules of fat into smaller globules. Okay, that's the answer for that. What causes movement of food inside the alimentary canal? All of you know this. Peristaltic movements, rhythmic contraction of muscles of the inner lining of the esophagus is called peristaltic movements, which regulates the food entry into stomach. What causes movement of food inside? That's okay. Why does absorption of digested food occur mainly in the small intestine? Because complete digestion of the food takes place only in the small intestine. Addition to that, we find the small intestine, inner lining of the small intestine contains finger-like projections called villi, which increases the surface area for absorption of the nutrients. And secondly, the other side of the villi are richly supplied with blood, so that absorption of the nutrients will be taking place through the villi only in the small intestine, and then the nutrients will be supplied to different parts of the body by transportation system. Next, match the group, you do it yourself. Why is the rate of breathing in aquatic organisms much faster than in terrestrial organisms? Quantity of dissolved oxygen is less in water, and therefore in order to meet the oxygen requirement they have to breathe faster because they need to take more oxygen. That's the reason. Why is blood circulation in human heart called double circulation system? Because blood passes through the heart 2 times in one cycle, hence it is called double circulatory system. What is the advantage of having 4-chambered heart? What is the advantage of having 4-chambered heart? Some animals, they have to maintain their body temperature constant irrespective of the environmental conditions. For such animals, large amount of energy is required. In order to do so, efficient system of oxygen supply is required, and therefore 4-chambered heart ensures that oxygenated blood or oxygen is supplied to each and every cell properly, and 4-chambered heart ensures that basically. That means intermixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood is totally avoided in case of 4-chambered heart, which ensures efficient supply of oxygen to such animals which require to maintain their body temperature. Mention the major events during photosynthesis: absorption of sunlight energy, conversion of sunlight energy to chemical energy, splitting up of water molecule into hydrogen, oxygen and electrons, and finally reduction of carbon dioxide to carbohydrates, which is glucose. These are the major events. In each of the following situations, what happens to the rate of photosynthesis? That you check yourself and you will be able to answer. Name the energy currency in the living organisms, when and where it is produced. The energy currency in the living organisms is ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is produced in mitochondria during respiration process. Also, interestingly, ATP is produced during photosynthesis in daytime in plants, isn't it? ATP and NADPH are the resultant molecules, which are the results of the products of photosynthesis process, isn't it? Which is a result of light reaction. So, in plants also ATP is produced during photosynthesis. What is common for Cascuta, ticks and leeches? All these are parasites. They depend for their food on other living organisms. Explain the role of mouth in digestion of the food. Mouth contains tongue and also teeth. Teeth would be able to grind the food particles into smaller particles, and mouth would be able, tongue basically, tongue enables wetting process, because without wetting food cannot be transported through the esophagus. So wetting is a necessary condition, and the tongue would be able to wet the food particles with saliva, and saliva contains salivary amylase enzyme, which converts starch into sugar. So these are the things which takes place in the mouth. What are the functions of gastric glands present in the wall of the stomach? They secrete gastric juice that helps digestion. It contains hydrochloric acid, it releases enzyme pepsin, and it releases mucus. Mucus protects the inner lining by the corrosive action of the HCl. HCl provides acidic medium for the action of enzyme pepsin. Pepsin converts proteins to peptones. Also, HCl kills the disease-causing pathogens. What are the functions? Okay, match the terms that you do yourself. Name the correct substances, correct substrates for the following enzymes. Here, the meaning of substrate means reactants. Substrate means reactants, and these are called reagents. Reagents are the one which attack on the substrates. So, trypsin acts on which reactant? What is the function of the trypsin? What is the function of amylase, lipase and pepsin? Trypsin converts proteins to peptones. Amylase, trypsin, question number 66, just a moment. Question number 66, yeah. Trypsin converts, name the correct substrate for the following enzymes. Trypsin acts on proteins, amylase acts on starch, pepsin acts on proteins, lipase acts on, what is that lipase? It will do fats basically, because lipase would be able to digest fats into fatty acids and glycerol. So lipase acts on fats. Once again, trypsin, substrates for trypsin, protein, substrate for amylase, starch, substrate for pepsin is a protein, and for lipase, substrates are fats. Why do veins have thin walls as compared to arteries? Because veins supply blood under, there is no pressure inside the veins, and therefore those are thin, you can say. Whereas arteries supply the blood under pressure, and therefore those are thick and elastic. What will happen if platelets were absent in the blood? Platelets perform coagulation function, isn't it? Blood clotting, which is a blood coagulation. So if the platelets are absent, then damaged blood vessels will not be repaired. Blood clotting does not take place. Plants have low energy needs as compared to animals. Explain. Are you able to understand why it is so? First of all, plants do not move, and many of the plant cells are dead cells. Example, sclerenchyma, and therefore their energy requirements are low compared to animals. Why and how does water enter continuously into the root? Xylem. So two things you can see. Water absorbed by the roots will be in the form of ions. So concentration of the ions increases in the roots, and thereby the substance is moved from a region of higher concentration to lower concentration. That is, water moves in the upward direction. Another thing is root of the xylem. Transpiration helps in transportation of water from roots to aerial parts. What is transpiration important for plants? The same, both are interrelated. Transpiration helps in movement of water and minerals from roots to aerial parts. Why it is so? It is a process. What is transpiration? It is a process by which excess water is lost by the plants in the form of vapor through stomatal pores, which creates a negative osmotic pressure in the aerial parts of the plant, and that is able to suck the water and minerals from roots to the aerial parts of the plant. How do leaves of the plants help in excretion? That we have discussed in detail. Now let us look at some long answer questions type and see whether we will be able to know this. Explain the process of nutrition in amoeba. We have discussed already. It's a holozoic nutrition. Describe the alimentary canal of a man. You have to describe the alimentary canal as different parts: mouth, esophagus, stomach, intestine, and the parts of the intestine you have to explain and what takes place in each, which has been discussed in detail. Explain the process of breathing in man. So breathing in the sense, during inhalation and exhalation process are the result of breathing. During inhalation, what happens? Ribs go up and chest cavity expands, lungs expand, volume increases, and the diaphragm becomes flat, and air is taken inside. Inhalation of the air takes place. During exhalation, there is a breathing out. What is the mechanism? Ribs come down, and the chest cavity, volume of the chest cavity decreases. The diaphragm becomes dome shaped, and air is exchanged out. So this is the breathing mechanism which I have discussed already. Explain the importance of soil for a plant growth. Very important here. The soil is, the top layer of the soil contains humus, which is a dead and decaying organic matter, makes the top soil porous. Why porous nature is required? Because for atmospheric nitrogen fixation, the bacteria present in the soil would be able to help the nitrogen fixation, and they help in conversion of nitrogen in the form of nitrites and nitrates that are required by the plant, that can be absorbed by the plant. That means the top soil, if it is porous, then only if the top soil is porous, then only the plants will grow. So, and also one more thing is, the soil provides water and minerals. This is how you can explain the importance of the soil. What else will you be able to explain? One more thing is, one particular keyword I can use: the bacteria present in the soil and the plants, they live in symbiotic relationship, meaning mutually interdependent on one over the other. So these are the importance of the soil which you can explain. Draw the diagram of the alimentary canal of man and label the following parts, mainly digestive system. How do carbohydrates, proteins and fats get digested in human beings? So these things have been discussed in detail. Carbohydrates are converted into, basically carbohydrates are nothing but starch and all complex substances which are converted into glucose, proteins to amino acids, fats to fats and fatty acids and glycerol. All this takes place in the mouth as well as in the stomach and intestine. That process you need to explain, which we have discussed in detail. Explain the mechanism of photosynthesis. We have discussed in detail. Explain the pathways of breakdown. Explain 3 pathways of breakdown in living organisms. 3 pathways of breakdown of glucose, actually it is. So glucose into energy we have discussed in detail. Describe the flow of blood through the heart of human beings. We have discussed during the class in detail. Describe the process of urine formation in kidneys. This also we have discussed, and what are the factors that affect the urine formation also we have discussed. Yeah. I think these are the some of the questions from exemplar. Many of the questions are not very difficult, simple in nature. I hope you have understood, and I request you to go through once again the entire chapter video lecture as well as the in-text out-text questions and through the exemplar questions. Okay, let us end this section and let us end the lecture here. Life process chapter is complete in all respects. Thank you very much for watching.